Hello, everybody, and welcome to the DATAcated Show. My name is Kate Strashney. I'm the founder of DATAcated and host of the DATAcated Show. I am extremely happy to announce that we have a very unique topic today, something that I've personally never discussed, and you likely have not really given it too much thought about, but I really think it's important, so I'm really glad we can talk about this. The topic is tolerance in data. And it's all about striking the right balance. Now, with me here today, I've got Michael Lieberman. He is the founder of Lassoo and TrialFire, and he's going to talk to us about what tolerance actually means in data. Why is it important? How does AI play a role in all of this? So, without further ado, I do want to bring him up on our virtual stage here. Michael, hello, hello. Welcome to the DATAcated Show.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me, Kate.
Of course, happy to have you. Thanks for doing this on your vacation. I think it's an honor that you took a break from tanning at the beach to join the DATAcated Show. So I appreciate it. I think a great place for us to start is for people who are not familiar with you or Lassoo. Just give us a quick intro into how you founded that company and who you are.
Sure. So, we have two companies that are in essence the same platform. One of the products is TrialFire, which is a behavioral analytics platform with a focus on marketing attribution. And we also offer the tool as a Headless Analytics offering, which is about collecting behavioral data and pushing it out into the tools that you're going to use to activate on. So, been in this space for 10 years now, and happy to kind of share some of the thoughts and learnings we've had as we built the business, and specifically around how important considering tolerance is with data.
Absolutely. So you said headless analytics. Can you talk a bit about that? What does that mean?
Sure. So with TrialFire, as we built it out, we obviously had a front end where you could build your reports, where you can define the different insights that you want to put onto dashboards and so forth. And what we found is that a lot of the organizations that we work with really want to collect that data. And I know that the term modern data stack might be dead or not, but push that data into Snowflake, for example, combine it with data from other sources, activate off of that environment. So the idea was, so many of the organizations we worked with were more interested in the raw data and how we effectively collect that raw data, specifically behavioral data from a web property, and utilize that not within our UI, not necessarily for reporting purposes. So Lassoo is really solving that particular problem.
Great. And do you have a specific industries that you're working in, or is it across the board?
We built a lot of functionality around transaction. So sports and entertainment clients, e-com, those are sort of the ones that make the most sense, because they're doing a lot of conversion online, and when you look at revenue numbers back against traffic and campaigns and so forth, it's just a much more easy to understand the value of the tool that quickly.
Okay, great. So we're here to talk about tolerance, and it's probably not the tolerance that comes to mind when people hear that word for the first time. So help us understand, what does tolerance in data actually mean?
So, if we go back to sort of the company that we previously founded, it was in the product lifecycle management space. We worked with engineering companies and manufacturing companies across different industries. And one of the concepts in that world, like, let's say I make a brake pad, for example, is when I define what that's supposed to look like, I would have a tolerance on, say, something like a hole in a piece of metal. And that tolerance determines how far from what the expected value of that, say, hole is, and it's still acceptable to pass your quality standards, if you will. So if the hole's supposed to be, and I'm going to make this much bigger than it usually is, let's say it's got to be a 1-inch hole with a tolerance of 2 millimeters. Well, a 1-inch hole or 1.2, I'm merging two different types of measurements there. That's half my Canadian, half being in the stateside. But if I've got a 1/2 inch tolerance, that means even if it's a 1/2 inch bigger than that 1 inch, it's still unacceptable in terms of quality control.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that companies have unreasonable expectations for tolerance levels where maybe they don't need to?
I think there's the fundamental issue of trust in data.
Mm-hmm.
And I think depending on what you're doing with that data and what your domain is, it's important to consider that tolerance or that level of deviation from the expectation or what you'd expect. So I think, people definitely want that 100% accuracy. I want to know every visitor to the site. I want to know every, campaign touch and those types of things. Obviously talking more on the marketing side. And you're never going to get that. So the question is, what kind of tolerance do you have for deviation from 100% accuracy? Now, if you look at a different side of it and you talk about, say, your financial data and transactions, but you don't really have much room for tolerance there. Double entry accounting is largely defined to eliminate any of that deviation from what's expected, right? I want to know every transaction. Having transactions that have the name of the person that, say, made the payment but not the dollar amount, I mean, you've got a bit of a problem there. If you're missing a couple of sessions in a customer journey, is it still going to give you that directionality? And to be honest with you, I think that the core idea in what I guess I'm trying to point out with specifically marketing data or customer data is, in a lot of cases, you're looking for directionality. Where do I invest my money? Where do I optimize a customer experience? How do I, change the UX in a product? I don't need 100% accuracy there. And it's funny because when I put this post up a while ago, there's a lot of different people sort of chiming in on what they think is their accepted level of tolerance. Even for a metric, let's say it's conversion rate. What's your tolerance level? If it's off by 5%, does that mean the number is useless? In many cases, not.
It depends, right? Is this financial numbers, healthcare data, or is it customer journey? And
Yep.
tell the audience about your post, because not everyone has seen it yet. I know it feels like everyone has seen it, Michael, but not everyone has seen it yet.
Well, I think that was this idea that I had, and I'd seen comments about this topic in the past, but I really do think that the idea of tolerance applies in the data space because, like I said, you got to work with a little bit of ambiguity in some scenarios. So the concept of tolerance helps illustrate that, and that you might not be perfectly that 1-inch circle or 1-inch hole, but that doesn't mean the quality is bad, right? There's obviously a lot of conversation in the space about governance and quality and integrity of data and all the other facets of it. But while there's a desire for numbers to align across systems and data to be that perfect view and guarantee that it's telling you exactly what to do, there's some fallacies built into that. And I think that you have to take things with a grain of salt, again, depending on domain. And that becomes something to consider and something that maybe needs to be, socialized up to management, because the expectation that, things are 100% accurate for some types of data is just, it's never going to be that case. And sorry, just to add to that, I mean, a big part of what we have done at TrialFire is attribution. There's a lot of talk about MTA, multi-touch attribution, and is there loss of signal with cookies and various other privacy challenges or whatnot. At the end of the day, I tend to make the point that you're never going to get any of it 100%, but you're looking for directionality. I need to know what to invest in. Do I need to know that it's not an accounting system? I need to know that I spend this, I got exactly that. I need to know that I've spent here, this is resulting in this, increase in revenue or loss, not loss, but it's not resulting in the type of revenue I'm looking for. And that should be guiding me. And that should be enough to get a tremendous value out of the platform.
So a lot of times people focus on getting the good data, good quality data, the perfect picture. Are you suggesting that maybe some teams should accept the fact that it's never going to be 100% accurate, and that we should just take what we can get to make decisions directionally in some cases, like marketing?
Well, again, let's bring back that concept of tolerance. What level of tolerance do I have for incomplete data?
And who decides this? Who actually picks that tolerance level? Let's give an example where a burger joint company, and we want to track our customer journey for people who buy burgers online. I don't know, my example is getting wacky, but who on the team? Is it the data team? Is it the marketing team? Who actually decides, like, okay, we're good with a not perfect data quality?
Well, I think it's in every data question has got to be driven by the business. Meaning, let's say I'm doing forecasting based on the sales of my burgers online, and I need to know how much to buy in terms of ingredients ahead of time, and how much to prep for that rush of online orders from Kate hamburgers. So now that I know that, I mean, if I'm off by 2 or 3% and I make 4 extra burgers, is it that important? How much effort should be spent on the data folks trying to get that perfect? Again, it's the tolerance, I think, goes into fundamentally what is the business objective. That's got to define everything that I think happens here, because I'm using data as a means to an end, not for its sake itself. So that the search for the oracle of perfect data, not that was a shout out to Oracle in any way, but
Oracle, you just got a shout out from Michael Lieberman.
Yeah. So those are the things that I think are definitely the drivers there. But you can see how relevant that that is, right?
Yeah.
Do I make too many burgers? Am I investing in too much media? A handful of extra burgers, maybe the guys that are cooking it get that, and it's really not an end of changing the directionality of that business at all.
Would you say that there's an added cost to getting down to a lower tolerance percentage or level?
I mean, absolutely. Those numbers, which some people say are true or not, and spending 75 or 85% of your time wrangling data and cleaning, and anybody in the data world knows that you could have, and this is actually one of my favorite jokes, of like, you have Kate, which is Kate, Kate with, like, I don't know, Exante Goo on the E on it, and then we have like Kate spelled with a CATE, and it's there's an element of, well, how perfect do I need to get it? I mean, that might be a silly example, but
better get my name right, damn it.
Well, you better get. I mean, your last name's going to be a bit harder than the first name. I could see people misspelling that a lot more time. See you doing it too. I do it on my own name, so. But yes, you can spend hours trying to wrangle and get the perfect data set. And again, it depends on the use case. So if it's like data in my ERP, obviously that might be much more relevant in terms of shipping and so forth, customer records. But if you roll it to the other side, when I think about it, I kind of think about data in sort of two ways. There's the records, the raw records. Like when somebody was using our previous company for product development, like the bill of materials, if it's off, and you go to production, that data's got to be perfect, right? You have an element of, something could be slightly, the spelling of the name could be off, but if the parts that go into product and I just built something and it cost me millions of dollars, that's where I kind of flip it around to the business case on how important it is and how much you need to validate. But to your specific question, you could spend hours trying to get that perfect data set. You can spend hours trying to align numbers across 3 systems from a metrics perspective. Many tools calculate things different. This goes into the governance question and so on.
So we're here for defining the right balance. So Michael, what would you say is the right balance? Is there a magic number for each industry, or is there a magic number for each use case of what a normal tolerance level should be?
Again, I think you're talking about something that's very specific to the business case and then the subdomain, right?
Yeah.
In something like in an accounting system with transactions, stuff that gets reported up, there's recently that famous mistake in data from, I think it was Lyft, where they added an extra zero on a number that was published for growth rate or something along those lines. And I think I had made a comment on how who finds out about the errors is a problem. So I mean that's a bit of a separate point, but is there a ideal tolerance? Well, I mean, ideal is 100.
Yeah.
You want to get it as right as possible, but
Of course.
how is my decision process going to be affected based on that deviation from the expected, right, or from the ideal? And for some, I think the more broad the metric is, the more tolerance you have in it. The more specific, obviously, the tighter the tolerance has, right?
Yeah. And it seems like it's a pretty straightforward concept, right? But you're saying that some companies are still maybe struggling, like marketing, for example, where they are striving for 100%. So what are some best practices to avoid teams focusing too much on getting it 100% right and just sort of moving things along in their data plus business processes?
I think that the problems are always people in process, right? And I think that's the driver to determine, how much time should I spend on getting this accurate? And accurate's a dangerous word too. That's why I actually like tolerance, because you want your numbers to be accurate in terms of defining, my directionality and where I'm going with something. I think there's some education as to, again, to leadership, to make sure that there's an understanding that, being perfect in terms of these numbers, like attributing every visit to a specific, individual, you're going to spin your wheels, right?
Yeah.
There's an opportunity cost to whatever you're doing. And your data teams, they're probably pretty busy with a bunch of Jira tickets and trying to, get data to make things work. I think there needs to be that dialogue. I always say that there needs to be that dialogue between the data, the data side of things and the business side of things. If they're both running in isolation, well, maybe the data folks are there with that desire to try and make everything perfect, and business is expecting everything to be perfect. In reality, it's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I feel like any data issue we talk about, it's always like, well, we got to talk to the business. We got to keep communications open, lines of communications. Why is it so damn hard for people to talk to each other? And do you have any suggestions, advice on how to make those two teams just communicate better? Is it on the data team or is it on the business team to own that and initiate that process?
Well, I mean, I think in many cases, business comes with a request.
Yeah.
The request is, sent to the team to go and try and determine an answer or a metric or whatever, a data set that gets pulled. And I think in many cases, when it just goes through that Jira path, it's here, go and get me this. And a lot of times it's thrown over the wall, if you will. I think that breeds resentment on the data side. And, and then eventually the resentment kind of goes back and forth. So I think that just clarifying requirements, like if you build a product, you need your requirements. Otherwise everybody's building in a vacuum, right? You got to know what you're trying to do. And I would go further than just saying requirements. I would say, what are you trying to do? Because I think what I found in many cases is business is asking a question in a way that they think they're trying to answer a problem, but they're approaching it based on maybe the way that they can describe it in English, as opposed to the way that the data represents what they're actually trying to find out.
Well, and hopefully Gen AI and Gen BI is going to bring us closer to bridging that gap, because it's sort of helping the data team understand what the business is saying. It's sort of this translator if you use it properly. So I wanted to actually bring the concept of AI into our conversation and ask you, how does AI actually impact tolerance? Is it something that's going to help maybe tighten up tolerance levels, or just share your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that's a big box to unpack. I think there's a lot of different parts to that question. The foundation for any kind of AI model, let's say AI, and then let's add the Gen AI part to that as well. I mean, it's a data foundation, right? I need data in order for a machine learning model to work and constantly train it. And even in the output of a model, we have this constant thought around tolerance and how close we are to what that expected output is from reality. And that's why there's this cyclical training of, I get my results and I keep training. So I think people kind of understand that. The data scientists definitely do in that capacity. When you start getting into Gen AI and this idea of using a data set and then augmenting it maybe with my own metrics and further data, there's something there for the tolerance and what I expect as the output. Obviously, garbage in, garbage out.
Goodness in, goodness out is what we like to say on the DATAcated Show.
All right. Well, goodness in, goodness out is a huge part of it. I think that in between part, which is sort of trying to interface, let's call it kind of what it is, maybe the text to SQL layer, if we will, where we're trying to do some of the use, Gen AI and natural language to get queries and real data out. I mean, I made a joke the other day where it's like the business person puts in his request into, the chat box, and he gets the same result that he expects, or the same output based on his question that he would from a data analyst, which is because the question was originally phrased wrong. Kind of my point around, it's not necessarily what you're looking for based on the way that the question is asked. Now, might there be some interesting opportunity to sort of play that role of, or address that back and forth role that I'm sort of alluding to between business and data, where it's, okay, this is what I'm asking, and being able to come back and say, well, is this what you're trying to do versus that? And why do you need this? And, maybe some of the data folks don't ask those questions because they're not used to sort of the pushback with, say, senior leadership asking for some numbers or metrics or another dashboard, if you will.
Yeah.
But that could be an interesting use case where it's not so much about just generating the SQL or the abstracting away or obfuscating the SQL. That could be an interesting. I mean, if you think about it in the Copilot scenario, a lot of devs will go in and obviously work with like an AI Copilot to sort of understand the errors in their code, or how could I formulate this better, or how could I approach this better. I think there's definitely a use case for that. Not necessarily, here's the query that I want to generate. Tell me how many people wear, red baseball caps at the Blue Jay game or whatever. But if this is what I was looking to do, how might I best formulate the question? Maybe that might be an opportunity before you kick off the Jira ticket.
Yeah, I actually think so. The, I guess, excitement around Gen AI and the fact that almost every company wants to include some sort of chatbot or Gen AI feature in their organization will probably push for lower tolerance for bad data, because now so many more people can ask questions. So many people can ask different questions that we may not even have thought to ask, because we're not, let's say, we're not the business. We don't know that that's what the business cares about. But now it's on their keyboard. They could just go ahead and ask. So the risk of having bad data coming to them in a very confident manner, because, ChatGPT is the most confident out there, even if I'm going to say even if he is really wrong, because maybe he'll be a she later when she's right more often. But right now,
that reminds me of my dad, who whenever he talks about Waze, he never says Waze. He says, she told me to turn right here or turn left there. He calls her she.
My father-in-law has a female name for his GPS, and she says she's always wrong. And I'm like, Why is that? What's up with that?
It's funny that you mentioned that, because one of the people that responded, not to go back to tolerance, which I guess is kind of our topic, was somebody from the geospatial world made a comment and said, if I need to know, an area of land, do I need to be to the 1 meter or 2 feet from that point, or is being, half a mile good enough? Well, I mean, if I'm looking for gold, half a mile might be fine, right? So
where's the gold? Hold on, go back to that.
I don't know that there's any gold there, and I don't remember exactly what his example was, but the idea is, I think that the specific back and forth was, you're getting picked up from Uber. Do I need to know that I'm standing at exactly this, 2 inches from here, or do I need to know I'm within
50 feet,
20, 30 feet?
Yeah.
Then I'm going to wave anyways and say, it's me, Michael. And they're
I'm over
know,
here. Yeah.
Right. So again, there's an
depends.
added cost to be more accurate with that level of tolerance, to be to that millimeter or that inch.
Yes.
So is it worth it? Right. I think there's trade-offs.
Definitely a trade-off. And Susan just she said it has to be a man because a woman is never wrong. Thanks, Susan. Your value has been added for this call. Thank you. But going back to the ChatGPT example, do you agree that there's going to be this upheaval in trying to clean as much of the data that maybe we are not using to run our dashboards and reports on, just data we're collecting, and sort of this pressure to keep that data quality as high, as perfect as possible, for the reason that now everybody could eventually, I know we're not there yet, but eventually you could just query any type of data. You don't need to say, hey, IT team, pull some SQL queries and do some stuff and manipulate that data into how you usually do it. No, you'll be able to just talk to it, right? Which is kind of scary.
I think 100%. I think at the root of that is the idea of socializing or democratizing data.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe it's more concrete in people's minds because it comes, from the ChatGPT interface. But the minute you put an analytics and any kind of ad hoc capabilities in the hands of people that maybe aren't ideal to leverage that, they can make the wrong inferences from looking at a set of data. So I think in some cases there is a benefit to going through people that understand the numbers before it's just acted on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you're right with that idea of chat. I mean, we see it with some of the posts and AI written posts that people have. It's only as good as the inputs into it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's assume we kind of know how it all works for the sake of our conversation.
Yes.
Goodness in, goodness out, but.
Oh, you got it. Look at that. Nice. Yeah. By the way, speaking of AI and posts, I have so many bots commenting on my content. It's so obviously bots. It's so annoying. I'll say something like, looking forward to speaking on stage at this, event coming up, and the bot from some random bot, let's just say I know for a fact this person is not going to be joining me on stage, and the comment would be like, we're so excited to join you on stage. I'm like, didn't know you're part of this, but okay, great. But obviously it's AI bot, so we're definitely not there yet. And
but I think it is an exciting use case for it, and again, there's a lot of ways where it could be very helpful, and I think people are getting more accustomed to the opportunity, but also the challenges. People are more accustomed to models. People are I think today's Reddit's IPO, the zeitgeist of conversation. Oh, ChatGPT, it's trained on Reddit data, a lot of Reddit data, and people have their perspectives on Reddit.
Reddit's interesting.
Reddit's a fun one. So
they're definitely fun is a good way to describe it. I'll let that word go.
Well, if you need to stream a hockey,
it's slightly toxic, slightly just.
Yeah.
There's a platform for everyone. Listen.
There is, and listen. There's corpus of information out there.
Yeah.
Right. It's got a lot there, but people, I think, do to a certain extent, when they kind of hear the horror stories of maybe the output from from their AI, Gen AI, the 8 fingers photograph that somebody tries to pass off as, they understand both the limitations of the technology, but also how important the underlying data is. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. So Michael, I know we're getting close to time. So last question before my final question, if that makes sense, is your parting words on the concept of tolerance. Like if the audience were to remember one thing about tolerance in data and striking the right balance, what would that be?
Make sure that it makes sense for the context that you're in. If it's something like, your accounting system, that data has to be perfect. If it's your engineering system and you're building against it, it's got to be perfect. If it's a metric on how many people showed up to your site and you've got a signal loss of 5% or 2% or whatever, you and your team decided makes sense, that's fine. That tolerance level is something that you should be factoring in, to the point where, not that there's an exact parallel, but if you're looking at, say, the politics or whatnot, they're always like, this poll says that this is going to happen within a margin of error. I'm not talking about a margin of error, but I'm just trying to equate the concept that you got to give us some wiggle room.
Absolutely. Well, and now for the final question, Michael, for people who want to follow you, follow up, continue the conversation, check out your multiple companies, where do they go?
Best place is probably LinkedIn. If you're watching this, you probably know Kate. You could probably find me through Kate's shared connections, but it's Michael-Lieberman would be the LinkedIn /Michael-Lieberman. I think that's the easy way. Just look me up. You'll find me as at co-founder at Lassoo.io or trialfire.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, Michael, thank you so much for being on the DATAcated Show. It's been a pleasure. I have definitely learned a ton more about tolerance than I ever knew. So thank you so much for enlightening us, and thanks for chatting on your vacation, nonetheless.
Well, it's not really a vacation. I'm just not at home. At this point, it's work.
He's working, everybody, I promise. All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.